guys, so today I thought I would show you my GCSE coursework art folder, which is worth 60% of my final grade. I thought I would show you this because I love watching these videos and I thought I wanted to change up my channel a bit from academic and do a bit more of other subjects as well. And for anybody wondering, I'm on the exam board WJEC, so if you're on a different exam board to me, don't compare your work to mine because they're based on different criteria. I just thought you might find it interesting to see the sort of work that I do. So with that being said, I'll show you my art folder. The theme I chose for my coursework was contrast, and before we start our project we have to make a mind map of the artists we plan to use, techniques, primary sources and initial ideas for what our final piece could be. So this is just my mind map where I basically wrote down a load of ideas to gather inspiration for what I actually wanted to do during the project. And I don't know why, but before we actually started our coursework we had to do a little project on still life, so I just drew some vases and stuff, and I basically just used a few different materials, and then after that we got on to our actual project. So right at the beginning I had no inspiration, and when I'd done my mind map I'd meant to have included pictures, which I hadn't, so I did a little inspiration page with a load of pictures, and then I wrote some ideas about what ideas I could take from the pictures around it, and then that counted for the rest of my mind map, which I hadn't done. So because my theme was contrast, I eventually decided that I wanted to contrast urban and rural landscapes, and I also wanted to use a bit of colour contrast such as sunsets, so I just collected together a load of primary photos that I'd taken, and I took some myself, like in London and in Devon and stuff, and I wrote all about this in a document we have to do called My Intentions, but that's further on in my art folder. But these are just some photos that I collected, which were my primary photos that I had to base my ideas off of. And then the first thing we had to do to actually show art skills was draw our primary photos in a variety of materials, so I just picked up my favourite ones and I drew them, and some of them are better than others, yeah. And this was kind of an important stage because this is where you start to decide which elements of photos you can draw best and which materials work best for different sorts of photos that you've collected. So I have a whole range of materials, like I didn't just do painting, I did textiles and stuff as well, and obviously some of them are really bad that I just had to rush at the end to fill space, but as long as I've got a few ones that are decent, that is alright. And this is a document called My Intentions, where you basically have to write out your initial thoughts about where you're going to take your project, and you don't have to stick to it throughout your project, but the examiner can see where you've changed your mind and stuff from reading it. And this is where it kind of went a bit downhill because these were our artist studies, and for our artist studies we don't do any pastiches, we just take the photo and then we recreate it with different materials, and then we have to write about the piece and about the artist. I never wrote about any of the artists, which maybe I should have done, but I couldn't really be bothered, which is not a good attitude. But basically we just had to do a study on each artist in 4 different materials and write about it, and I ended up doing 4 artists because you have to base your ideas off your artist's work as well, so it's important to include them. And after I'd done them I realised that a lot of my studies weren't that good, so I ended up redoing a load of them and showing that I'd improved, even though I just hadn't tried in the first place, which isn't good, but I ended up doing my improvements, which shows that I've made progression, even though I haven't, but who needs to know that? So those parts of the project were the parts which we did between Easter and the summer of year 10, and then once we came back we had to produce further primary images, which were photos which we'd taken during the summer on holiday and stuff. And then we moved straight on to design ideas, which is where my project started to go downhill because I just ended up improvising and making up random ideas which I had no intention of using. So my first idea was this weird reflection of a building onto a lake to show contrast, and then I tried drawing it but failed badly. We also had to write about from which primary images the ideas came from, how it linked to our theme and our artist influence, and then we included a few samples and further ideas. So to fill a bit more space and get some more work in, I did these little drawing-y, painting-y, collage-y things of one of the photos which I was planning to use. And I only did these recently, that was the last thing that I added to my folder, so these aren't actually finished, but they are now. And then my second design idea was contrasting well kept and badly kept buildings of the same style, and I just photoshopped them together and tried drawing it and did some like samples, which I wasn't too happy with, to be honest. And then after that, my first design idea, I said that I was going to do a collage of a couple of photos with some perspective, and when I didn't really do very well on my sample, I had to include some more primary photos just to show what I'd intended to do. And to show development, we have to develop one of our ideas to something more developed. So I took my second idea and developed it into something else by using different photos, and I did a few samples and wrote about why I'd chosen to develop it, which basically showed how some materials work painting the ideas which I'd had, so that I could decide which materials to use for my final piece. And then I did some more samples of the same picture with different materials and techniques just to see what works best. I didn't actually do it immediately after, but just to show progression and make it flow better, I put a flowchart in of my final piece and how it developed, and that was my big final piece. But afterwards, my teacher told me that if I wanted to get an A star, I'd probably have to develop my idea further to do another final piece, which would gain me more marks, so that is what I did. And at this stage I was like properly improvising. I really didn't know what I was doing. I just kind of made it up as I went along and wrote down some stuff, and I did a lot of this the night before it was due in. But basically I decided that I was going to do a collage of lino prints, which I'd already done. So I did a little sample of some collaged rubbings, and I did some testers of some lino prints and some more rubbings, and then I just put together some pieces, and I found something which I liked. I created several pieces but only liked one of them, so I put the ones that I didn't like in as testers and samples, even though they were intended to be a final piece. And then with my final piece I wrote a little bit about it at the side, because at this stage I hadn't done my evaluation. And then right at the end I did a huge evaluation which took me so long, about like the whole project and both my pieces and like my theme and basically loads, and it was awful to write, but that's the end of my project. I hope I've given you some inspiration, and I hope you guys are all doing well with your art. I don't know if you'll have finished yet. I know on my exam board we finished art this week, so my folder's handed in, it's at school. I'm probably never going to see it again. That's alright, I don't like it anyway. Yeah, so thank you for watching and thank you for all the support. I really appreciate it, and stay tuned for more videos.